Hi, everyone. Welcome to Lectora Live. It is already the end of January, and we did one show this year before with Scott Barnett, and today we've got a great show. Joining us today is Dr. Jeff Gordon, professor at Vanderbilt in Nashville. He teaches multimedia, he teaches Lectora, and other things. Let's do our intro, and here we go.
Well, thank you for having me.
And we are back. Sorry about that, Jeff.
No problem.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, my pleasure.
Great to be here.
You and I met on the Lectora Advisory Board meetings we had, I think, back in November. And
Yes,
it was a real pleasure meeting you and hearing your opinions and seeing the things that you're doing at your college. And tell us a little bit about what you do at Vanderbilt.
I'm a professor of informatics. And just so you know, informatics is the science that takes information and turns it into knowledge so that the people I work with are primarily nurses. They can make appropriate clinical decisions that result in effective and safe outcomes. A lot of people confuse informatics with IT. IT is actually part of informatics, and I deal with the IT part. I'm not a nurse, don't play one on TV, but I work extensively with them. And my area is actually educational informatics, where I talk about using the technology to promote e-learning and educational outcomes that can result in effective learning, primarily on the part of people who are going to be effective clinicians. And so that's what I do. I'm a faculty member in that specialty, and we teach a number of courses to that effect.
Now, for those who might be interested, what is the main difference between informatics and analytics?
Analytics looks more at the data analysis side, statistical analysis, and things like that. Informatics can include that as well. But informatics tends to be a little broader than that. That's a component of informatics, but informatics is more than that. Informatics, for example, does include some of the IT issues, and in fact, in most environments, the informatics department actually controls most of the IT. So analytics and IT are several of the legs of the stool that hold up informatics. And basically, allow people to make the appropriate clinical decisions.
Yeah, and I remember when I was going to school, informatics was also part of knowledge management.
Yes, it is.
And the heuristics of different situations, which, like you said, allow you, especially in medicine, allow you to make sometimes really good decisions based on all the information you have at hand on a patient or anything else.
Correct.
Now,
Correct. That's exactly right. Now, in 2016, with federal mandates that we have electronic medical records and the ability to search those things, we're able to make better clinical decisions because we can now aggregate data and look for patterns of the data and behaviors and things like that. Plus, we now have more people who have access to the data. So it's not just somebody checking out a patient chart anymore that sits on a clipboard next to on the outside of the patient's room in the hospital, but anybody who has a professional reason and interest for participating in that patient's care can now get access to all of that individual's clinical information.
Yeah, that's pretty good. How did you get involved with Lectora and teaching that as part of the informatics?
Well, it's interesting. Lectora and I go way back. Travantis is originally housed in Cincinnati.
Hmm.
And for about 27 years or so, I was a professor at the University of Cincinnati and got to meet a lot of the people who were involved early on with the development of Lectora. And then there was an initial advisory board that was set up, and they were looking for people to participate in that, mainly from industry, but some from education. And I got asked to do that, and that was in the late 90s. So it was right around then I started teaching with Lectora. We created a series of courses actually this was in the College of Education at the University of Cincinnati. And then when I moved here, I just took all of that information with me, and we rebuilt it here, only this time instead of building it for teachers, we built it for nursing students.
That's interesting. At what point in their curriculum do they start taking your training?
We are an advanced practice environment for the most part. So our students are already nurses,
Okay.
and they're coming back for advanced practice training. They can specialize in being a family nurse practitioner or an adult nurse practitioner. And one of the areas of specialty is informatics. So ours it's about a year and a half program, and year and a half, depending on whether they do it full or part-time. And I actually offer a multi-semester sequence of courses that we affectionately call the Geek Sequence. And it includes the two primary semesters are web development, which we now focus on e-learning, and that's where I teach Lectora, and then database applications, where I actually show them how to build a database behind Lectora to collect all the responses so that if they don't have access to an LMS, for example, they can record the data.
That's really interesting. Yeah, a lot of people out there don't realize that while Lectora is an e-learning tool, it's also a web development tool. You could create websites with it. Like you said, you can create front-end to databases. It's actually pretty robust in some of that. Maybe not as robust as maybe a full-fledged programming language, but it can tie into JavaScript and everything else. So
absolutely.
A lot of work. Mm-hmm.
It actually is very effective in terms of building a front end. You still need a back end. You're going to use some database application. At the low end, you could use Microsoft Access. The high end, it could be Oracle or Microsoft SQL. And then you have to have the middleware, and that obviously is a programming language. And we actually teach active server pages, ASP, to our students, not to turn them into programmers. That's not our goal. Our goal is to train these nurses in informatics so that they are going to be the interface between the clinical professional staff and the IT staff, and they have to be able to speak the same language. So they have to understand issues centering around screen resolution and how screens are created and how you move from one screen to the other, and database applications, and even data normalization we talk about. So they can speak intelligently to the IT folks who are developing the specific applications and then translate the needs of the clinical people.
Interesting. Well, I don't know if you know this, but my background's over 20 years in IT as well. I was an IT pro for a long time, managed IT departments, and it was a lot of fun. And then 20 years ago, we got into e-learning, and that's been a lot of fun. So
it has been fun, but I'll tell you, initially we used Lectora for web development. We weren't that interested in e-learning. I trained my students how to develop websites and applications like that. And it's really only in the past couple of years that we focused in on e-learning. And we focused in a particular area of e-learning because my students don't have the time to learn applications like Photoshop and to make things look nice and pretty. So they have to really move along. That's what we do.
Yeah. How do the students take to Lectora?
It has become a black hole of their time. They love it. Most of my students say it's the most interesting and fun course they've ever taken.
Oh, that's great.
They're playing with the toys. They get really, really good at it. The only problem is, I mean, obviously, if you're producing a website, you want to make it look as professional as possible, and you can with Lectora. But they also would need a lot of training behind the scenes to do that. One of my favorite expressions is, "You can put a paintbrush in my hand, that doesn't turn me into Monet." And the same thing is true with giving Lectora to these students. They can understand how it all works. They can talk intelligently to the development people so that they know what they're supposed to do. But they're really not going to produce, for the most part, a professional quality product in the 15-week period of time that they have to learn it and develop a project and use it.
Yeah, but at least it gives them the basics and foundation of where data comes from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. And now they actually are developing some interesting products. In fact, I had one student last year who took her application that she developed and leveraged it into a new position. So
good.
It's really good. If they can do that, that's fine with me.
What made you get into informatics? Was that one of the first things you did when you were going to school, or is that something that came later?
I actually trained as I have my PhD is in mathematics education, teacher training, and I'm an old retread high school mathematics teacher. Taught mathematics in junior high and science in high school for several years, and never really. This was back in the 70s. Never really thought about doing anything with technology. Never took a computer programming course. Really wasn't interested in it. And then microcomputers came out, and that kind of changed everything. And when I was at the University of Cincinnati, I used to brag that we in the College of Education had the first microcomputer lab on campus. We beat the School of Engineering by 6 months, and the Dean of Engineering would never let me forget it. And so we started that way, worked our way up. Originally with Radio Shack TRS-80 computers, then Apple IIs, later PCs. And then I was a contract worker for IBM for a while, where we developed some interesting applications. Came back. We developed, I worked with our medical center at the University of Cincinnati, and we developed some info window touchscreen applications. We developed managing the experience of labor and delivery, which was a interactive tutorial simulation using 12-inch video disc. And it takes you through from start to end. You get to make clinical decisions. If you make the wrong clinical decision, the patient the outcomes wouldn't be as good as they would be if you made the correct ones. Really taught people how to do this.
That's great.
And that was probably my first foray into e-learning, and then shortly after, got involved with Lectora.
Yeah, it's amazing how it hooks you, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's a black hole of my time too. I'll be working on things, and we use Skype for Business that indicates our presence. Green meaning we're online, and I've had students at 1 o'clock in the morning find me and say, "I have a question about something." And the next thing I know, the student is saying, it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I have to get up at 6 a.m. Would you mind if we ended this now? And no, I have to get up too. But it really has become a black hole of their time. And they
That's
love
so funny.
it.
Well, the other day I sent a note to, Daryl Fleary, product manager.
Sure.
And I sent it at 11 at night, figuring sometime in the morning he'd respond. So 2 in the morning his time, minutes after I send it, he responds. And I'm thinking, I love this guy. He doesn't sleep. He just works all day long, 24/7. He's a machine.
Sleep is greatly overrated.
It is.
My wife would disagree with that, but I would rather. I enjoy it. It's just a lot of fun, and at the end of it, you have a product that you can look at and say, I made that, and it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, that's the fun part. That is the fun part. There's a lot of authoring tools, and I've always liked the ability of Lectora to go beyond the simple. You can get into some pretty weird, complex things. I know one guy who works at Johnsonville Sausage, Anthony. He created a whole mathematical computational machine out of Lectora. I think he had something like 700 variables. It was mind-boggling, and he got it to work.
You can do it. I mean, it's It doesn't have subscripted variables, so in some ways it's more cumbersome.
Yeah.
But for what 99% of the people need in terms of variables, it does it perfectly.
Yeah.
I don't think most people need, you know, sophisticated. They don't need a computer algebra system built into their environment.
No, no. Now, you were talking about sharing some stuff on your screen. Did you want to share something?
Sure, I can share some things. Let me see. Make sure I can still do this. I'm not a heavy Skype user, so here we go.
Well, that
Let me
means you're
talk a little bit
sane.
about this. And this is how we're using it now. This has been really effective. A couple years ago, I would have my students develop basic websites, and they learn the idea and the concept of it. But it occurred to me that I've got a great e-learning tool here. Why don't we do it to promote e-learning and to teach informatics people how to create e-learning content? And so one of the things that I did was I asked my students, what is your biggest training challenge? Because they are responsible. My students, when they graduate and get jobs in informatics, are responsible for helping to design electronic record systems, electronic medical records and things like that, these applications. And they're also, when they're working in medical centers, responsible for implementing them. And when you implement something like that, if it's a new feature or a new record, suddenly you have to implement that and train anywhere from 300 to 1,500 people very, very quickly, because they have to be using it almost immediately. Or you have a new hire coming on, they've never used your system before, and now suddenly you're faced with training them. And these systems can be really, really complex. And so as I thought about it more, I said, why don't we, and I asked them, well, how do you do this? And what they said was they typically either teach it face-to-face, either in large groups, or if it's a single person, one-on-one, takes somebody a lot of time to learn it, or they may have some videos, and those can be effective, or they may have some paper documentation, or in some cases, they'll even build a sandbox in the electronic medical record and have people go in and play with fictitious data and just to learn how to navigate through the environment. And I asked my students how that was working for them. And they said, it's okay. It's just cumbersome and tricky, and you can't get everybody together. And it's just, there needs to be a better approach to this. And I thought, what better way to do this than to simulate it through an e-learning environment that one could create in Lectora or similar kinds of products. So, for example, and I'm not going to look at a medical record here. I am going to look at a patient portal. I was on the advanced development team for continuation of this product, which is our patient portal here at Vanderbilt. This is where the patient actually goes in and can look at their own record. And so this is that right now. And what you're given an account, and you log in, and I'll go ahead and start. I'm not going to go all the way in. And you can put in, and hopefully it works. And I'll look at my record, and it brings up this particular page right here. Now, there are lots of buttons here, and this process, as you work your way into this, gets really complicated. What does this do? What does this do? And things like that. And you can wander through it, but if you are a clinician learning how to use a electronic medical record environment, you need to do it fast. You just can't go wandering around and do that. And so if I were to click on, for example, my record, I could click on this, and I'm not going to go ahead into my record, but I mean, it would basically bring up my record. What we decided to do was to create a simulation of this. And what I teach my students to do is grab all the screens that you want, and we will build in Lectora this environment so that to the end user, it'll look exactly like they're going through the environment, when in fact, what they're actually going through is a relatively linear tutorial on how to engage in the environment. Mm-hmm. So let me go and do that right now. So you saw what the real thing looked like, and here it is. Let me go ahead and refresh that. And so you're going to see it like this. Now you're going to see this over here. It brings this up, and you can actually go in here and you can put in your name, and if you put in your password, and let's say you make a mistake on that and click the login button, it brings up the same screen you would see in the real activity. If you don't know exactly what to do, it circles it after about 3 seconds. Obviously, these are actions you can build easily into Lectora. I could have text prompt here. I could have audio prompt if I wanted to. I can do a lot of different kinds of things that I can do. Click back here. It takes me back here. Now I'll go ahead and type it in correctly if I remember what it is. And click login. And now I see this screen right here. Now, what I can do is I can disable these other buttons, but just not putting a transparent button over it. Here I put a transparent button over it. So now what I'm doing is I'm building muscle memory. So you click on to go here. And now I don't know what to do. I'm not exactly sure what to do, but I can see it highlights it, so I can click on to go here. And now I'm in the record. And now if I want to, I can click on over here, just like I would in the real application, and I could see a graph of my CO2s and what it was last time, what it was this time, things like that. So what I'm doing here is I'm simulating the real thing, and I'm building muscle memory so that they know to say, okay, if where I want to do is get to this, I click here, click there, click this next place, and I'm in, and they can do it very, very quickly. So, for example, if they were to start here, they would type it in, they click here, they know to click here, they can click here right away in the real thing, they can click right here, and then they're in, and they know how to do it. And so you're building this muscle memory. The nice thing about this is you can control what it is they see, you can control how much is interactive. So even though in the real application all of these buttons are interactive, I can decide by which ones I lay transparent buttons over, I allow to be active or not. I can even gray out the ones that I don't want them to see. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing. And we're teaching our students to do that. And it's been very, very successful. They're able to save a lot of time, generate a lot of learning going on in a very simple way. They can learn about e-learning with this, but they don't have to worry too much about graphic design because they're using the existing graphics here. Mm-hmm. They don't have to worry a great deal about instructional design because the path that the individual goes through is the path that they would go through in the real application. It's worked out really, really well.
Do you find that after they go through this kind of training, they have not only a deeper understanding of applications, but also kind of the thought process that went into building the application?
Yes, absolutely. And they actually come up with one thing that's even more important than that or extends from that. Because they can build a database back end to this, they know exactly what clicks the individual made and at what time they made them. So they can look at it and say, this is an area that apparently is confusing. They can now take that back to the development team and say, here's an area that you might want to go back and change and make simpler. So, for example, when I was showing you the real application, there have been changes made on the real application from the screens, and some of that is based on user feedback. Some of it could also be based on feedback from the clinicians who are going through an environment like this.
That's good. That's really good. So it gives them hands-on in the development process, in the cognitive process of understanding what records management is, though some of them probably already work in that. But it gives them...
they really get an understanding of the application they're trying to teach, too. They find that when they develop something like this, now because they're teaching a machine basically to do the same thing, they're learning it better. And they have looked at it and said, there may be some better pathways to get to this data than the one that's listed right here.
What do you think, and this is my controversial question of the day, what do you think? A lot of people are very critical of the college system right now because people are coming out with no skill sets. Obviously not in your case. These are professionals who actually have a definite skill set. What do you think some of the major good points and issues with the current university system is today as far as teaching and giving people skills?
Well, there's always this tension between vocational training and more of a liberal arts training. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, we are a master's program primarily and doctoral program. So our people are coming already with in some cases, a liberal arts background that they then transitioned into nursing. If they don't have a nursing background, we have what's called a pre-specialty program here at Vanderbilt, where they actually learn to become a nurse in a fairly short, abbreviated period of time before they go into a specialty. It's this constant dilemma of do we want to be a vocational school? Now, quite frankly, and this this gets me criticized a lot. Let's be real clear about something, that nursing schools, medical schools, law schools, professional schools are in every sense of the word vocational schools.
Sure.
They're teaching someone a vocation. I know that in education, vocational schools are not considered to be intellectually top tier, but I don't think you get more intellectual than a medical school, a nursing school, an education school, a music school, or a law school, or a business school, for that matter. Right. So by the time you hit the master's degree, the master's programs typically have turned into, even if you're in a liberal arts area, or you're still training in some ways for a job because you may be a faculty member in that area. At a university, or you may be a researcher in a particular area. You may be a researcher for a newspaper. So learning English or learning history actually makes you a better researcher, or political science for that matter. So by the time people hit their junior, senior year in a major, whatever it is, it really has become very vocational based. And I'm not opposed to that. I think that's a great idea. I want people, if they're going to invest all this, they ought to get a lot out of it. They need to get as much out of it as they possibly can. And that includes being able to do things. Now, do I expect my students to become web programmers or e-learning programmers or things like that? As I said before, no, that's not the idea. But they now know how to talk to the people who are, and they can have that foot in the clinical camp and a foot in the IT camp.
Yeah, which is actually good, because those are the kind of people that IT people don't like, because they know too much. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. But
there's this sense that some IT people don't have the world's greatest social skills.
Sometimes.
And I don't think that's really the issue. I think the real issue is they don't have the clinical knowledge or skills, and that the clinicians don't have the technology knowledge and skills. I mean, I had. When we were making some changes, some clinicians wanted some changes to a database application that we had created for our nursing students. They just assumed the change would be as easy as rewriting a paragraph in Word. They didn't realize that the minute you change how a variable behaves, it was changing it in 9 different programs in about 25 different areas. An informaticist would understand that. A clinician didn't. On the other hand, the IT people have trouble understanding what it is that the clinicians do. So there's this real need for, if IT people are really going to provide the kind of service that they provide, that they have someone who can translate back and forth what it is the end user really wants and needs.
Yeah. I mean, they in essence become the subject matter experts for the IT people, so they understand what processes or things they need to build to serve the user community.
Exactly right.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
It is.
Is part of what you do also considered bioinformatics?
There is a component of bioinformatics. I also teach the statistics course in our Doctorate of Nursing Practice course program. And so that deals more with bioinformatics. And we will do things in there. We will do some simple epidemiology kinds of things in there, where we'll look at vaccine effectiveness. And I'll ask questions like, how much of the population do you have to vaccinate in order to get a reduction in the disease? And that's based on the reproduction ratio of the disease, as well as the effectiveness of the vaccine. So we talk a little bit about that as well. So I have a foot in an area that has really nothing to do with Lectora or web development.
Yeah, that's interesting. As far as Lectora goes, What would you like to see in the future for the product?
Yeah, it's really funny. About 15 years ago, I produced a laundry list of the things that I wanted in Lectora, and virtually all of those things are there. I still would like, it would help me a great deal if we could ultimately have subscripted variables, particularly if you're using it for data output from a variable size database.
Yeah.
It would be really nice to have that. I can work around it, but it would be nice to have it.
Now, when you say subscripted, are you also talking about like matrix, where you can have a matrix
Yes.
of variables?
Yes.
I would love that too.
So, for example, let's say I want to use Lectora as the front end for a back end that's a news feed. Well, today I might have 5 articles. Tomorrow I may only have 2 articles. And it would really be nice if I could dump that information into variables, and if nothing was there, then it just wouldn't worry about it and just create some kind of loop to dump that information in. That doesn't exist, but quite frankly, that's a nit, and I can work around that.
Sure.
I can use JavaScript to work around those kinds of problems. So, and really, in some ways, to get some of those features, the really high-end features, you do have to know some kind of back-end language. And so we do some things in JavaScript, we'll do some things in Visual Basic Script, we'll do some things in SQL, and we'll do some things in HTML.
Yeah.
So
that'd be
you
great.
just have to kind of be flexible on those things.
And one of the things I like is that John Blackman, who's been on the show I think I've interviewed him 4 times at least. Plus,
He's
I know
terrific.
him. And
We go way back and have all kinds of really bad stories.
he's brilliant, though. The guy's brilliant.
Absolutely.
And what I like is he does have that IT background or a developer background. I keep always harping back to the fact that he was one of the developers of OS2, which is, to this day, I think still probably better in many cases than Windows. So
Yeah, I loved OS2. I was a big OS2 fan.
it was great.
And I was very disappointed when Windows 3.0 and 3.1 won out over OS2. Because if you go back and look at it, OS2 is a lot more like the Windows we have today than Windows 3 is to the Windows we have today.
That's true. That's true. OS2 had great hyper-threading. It made much better use of memory, had a protected core, which was nice because Windows doesn't. You can screw Windows up with not a lot of effort. So,
And
little things.
I missed that. But on the other hand, it gave a number of us, John perhaps especially, the education and training and experience he needed to really be where we are today.
Yeah, that's true.
I attended a conference in 2004. 2004? No, it was before that. It was around 2002 in Montana. And in the middle of winter, now, who schedules a conference in the middle of winter in Montana? I don't know. But it turns out a lot of the presenters could get there, but none of the participants could really get there. And so we decided, rather than run the conference the way we were going to run it, we kind of sat around and said, where would we like technology to be in 10, 15 years? And it was probably about 3 years ago. I pulled out that list. I don't even know where it is anymore, but I pulled out that list and I looked at it, and we're there. We're there. I mean, things not only work; they work well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think
I remember
about
I used to teach how to install the Windows operating system, Windows NT, on servers, and it was 19 disks, floppy disks, and it would work great until you got to the 18th or 19th disk, and then it would crash. And then my students would say, well, now what do I do? I said, well, you can't tell a client that, sorry, I tried, didn't work.
Yep.
Stay here and do it. Do it again.
Yeah. It's funny.
But now, I mean, I've installed Windows 10 3 times on 2 different machines in the past 3 days. And it's perfect every time.
It's pretty quick, too.
It is.
It's a quick installation. Unless you're
things,
like me.
Things work.
Yeah,
we just expect them to work, and they work.
Except when you have an SSD that you cloned from an original OS, then it doesn't work. I think I tried 20 times at home. I finally gave up and just reinstalled everything from scratch. There were some
that's,
bugs in that. But other than that,
solid state drives have some real advantages,
mm-hmm.
but they have some real disadvantages too.
Yeah.
In fact, that's why I said we installed it 3 times on 2 different machines. We actually had a minor solid state failure that required us to change something and reinstall it.
Yeah, we just built we build our own machines in-house. All the Windows machines we build, because we do a lot of video stuff, and we can build for $2,000 an $8,000 retail machine. So it's just fun. But we just built one of our first SSD machines. It's got an SSD OS, 4 SSD drives. It's pretty cool. And it runs like a bat out of hell.
I mean, my laptop, my last 3 laptops have all been SSD. The boot time is almost instantaneous, faster than my phone.
I know. And then, of course, and then you go back to one of the older machines we have, and it's like, oh, this is slow. Right. You get spoiled real quickly. A 2-minute wait is now unbearable. So it's just sort of funny. It's all perception.
I mean, we are the instant generations, I guess. Yeah. And
well, it's interesting. You brought up that it's all there right now. I knew some people that worked at Progress Software in Boston, and by the way, they used to ship in 50 floppies.
Yep.
And 36 just died. How do we work around it? It was fun.
They got bent. Yes.
But they said one thing. They said, no, our software hasn't really been optimized. Nobody's done anything faster in years. The chips are getting so fast that nobody notices. I had a guy tell me recently that database tuning, and I used to tune databases and I was a database architect. And they said, you don't have to worry like you used to because everything's so fast.
Right.
I keep going, no, but you can still tune to make it better.
We would hash code the columns we wanted searched on because it would search that much faster. But and I used to teach that. I used to teach people how to manually hash code.
Interesting.
And we've overwhelmed these problems with the power of the technology. We don't really have to worry about it anymore because technology is so powerful. It takes care of it for us.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's funny you mentioned the hash codes. I had to teach a database tuning class once with the 19 hashing algorithms for different ways of sorting data. And, no matter what you do, it's just not an exciting class.
Well, it's interesting. I would teach data sorting, too. And you had bubble sorts and things like that.
Yep.
The way I did it was I had everybody write their name on a 3x5 card and hang it around their neck with a piece of string. And then I would have, if they had 10 people, I would have 10 people and an 11th chair someplace. And I would say, okay, I want you guys to figure out how to put yourself in alphabetical order where only one of you is out of the chair at one time, off your chair at one time. And we would sit there, and they would work on it for about 30 minutes, saying, that's not right. And then they would finally come up with some way of doing it, and I would say, okay, now I want you to do it again, but I want you to repeat it. And they would have to come up with something that was a repeatable algorithm, and they learned it that way.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And somebody would take direction. Now you stand up, now you move over here, and you sit down over there. But the rule was only one person could be out of the chair at one time.
That reminds me a little bit of one time I was working on an old system, and the repair tech came out to the company, and he goes, and this is when disk drives were about 2 feet diameter and about 1.5 feet tall. Those were the old 10 megabyte or 20 megabyte platters. And he comes out and he goes, this happens all the time. It's spinning too fast. The letters are sliding right off. So he goes, so we got to put them back on their hooks and everything works fine. And the user is going, is that how they do it? Wow.
Yeah. We're aging ourselves here.
We are. Yes, we are.
But anybody that talks about the good old days in computing wasn't around. The good old days were really pretty bad.
They were sort of dismal sometimes.
The good old days are now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. No, I started in computing in '72, so that gives you an idea. So
Me too.
It's been a while. But
Me too. I actually started in e-learning. I was at the University of Illinois, got my degree in the College of Education there, and they were they used Plato, Program Logic Automated Teaching
Plato.
Organization. It was a system developed by the engineering group at the University of Illinois, together with the Control Data Corporation out of, I guess, Minnesota.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things when we learned that the speed of light just wasn't fast enough. We developed interactive applications, and we were working with students, I believe they were in Sweden. And the delay time was just way too long. We didn't really know about buffering, and people would hit the enter key multiple times because it wasn't responsive.
Yep.
And that's when you're dealing with kids, the speed of light just isn't fast enough.
No, that's true. I remember one of the first not programming, but e-learning languages I learned was probably somewhere in the 80s as far as a real language, and it was called Socrates. It wasn't very popular, and it was written in APL, a very old language that's still used probably by NASA. Interesting language. You had to just know your Greek alphabet and you were okay. It was fun stuff. But yeah, we are aging ourselves. But my wife...
we started teaching kids Logo. Remember that?
Yeah, Logo, Forth, all those kind of fun things. My wife actually worked at Teradata. They were the very first company to come out with a terabyte machine. And it took up probably a 5,000 square foot room with all the disks and platters and Y connectors. And now you can get a terabyte on your thumb. It's amazing. In fact, Samsung last year came out with a 15 terabyte SSD that's 2.5 inches. It costs
But as I caution people, if you don't back it up, that's just more to lose.
That's true. So you need two of them.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, this has been a real pleasure meeting here. And are you going to the Lectora Users Conference?
Yes, I put in to do a presentation actually on the topic that I identified here.
That sounds great.
So I will be there.
And I will see you there then. I put a presentation in on storytelling and immersive training using Lectora. So we'll see if it gets elected.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going anyway.
I'm looking forward to it. I really learn a lot at these meetings. And typically we'll try to send at least one or two other people and maybe even send them to training. Last year it was easy because we sent 4 people, but it was in Nashville, so just drive to the meeting.
Well, Lauderdale's a little further, but not too bad.
Fort Lauderdale's a little further away. But I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be fun. I've never been to Fort Lauderdale either, so it sounds like a pretty place to go.
Bring your sunscreen.
Bring the sunscreen. Yeah, John guaranteed it's beautiful out there. So
it is, but it can get hot.
Well, Jeff, a real pleasure working with you on the advisory board and having you on today. Where can people contact you if they have any questions or want to find out more about your programs?
They can email me. Probably the easiest way is email. I'm always on email, and I respond to email very quickly. My email address is jeff, Jeff, .S as in Sam, .Gordon, Gordon, at Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt.edu.
That's great.
So, and they can find me in the People Finder lookup. There are actually 2 Jeff Gordons here on this campus. The other one's a land manager in the School of Medicine. So we know each other. We've served on committees together, and we do very similar jobs. And very frequently, his people will call me, and sometimes I'll just answer their question. They don't even know they called the wrong one. So if they send an email to the other Jeff Gordon, he'll forward it right to me. Just delays it a couple hours.
I love it. That sounds great. Well, Jeff, hey, a real pleasure.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. And we'll send you a link as soon as it shows up so you can go take a look at it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. So if you are watching the show on YouTube, please subscribe, give us your feedback, and definitely don't be shy. So here we go. Have a nice one, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks, Jeff.
Bye.